My name is Jeffrey Inaba. I'm a principal of Inaba Williams Architects based in Brooklyn and in Los Angeles. From an early age, I always wanted to be an architect, and I think it was a thing of seeing somebody draw an architectural drawing and coming to the realization at an early age that that drawing corresponded to something that was physical in real space, and the idea that you could draw something that then would become physical just clicked somehow in my mind that that was something I wanted to do. Yeah, I grew up here in Los Angeles in a suburban part of the city, and in high school I took architecture classes. I knew I wanted to do an undergraduate degree in architecture, and I got accepted to UC Berkeley. It was a great experience, and I can't say enough about the UC system, the public school system. It's an amazing thing that exists by virtue of the taxpayers of California, and it was really through that I was able to go to college. For California residents, it was incredibly affordable, and I had a great experience learning architecture there. Both my parents are Japanese. They both were raised in Japan and came here in their 20s. And so I've always had a connection with Japan. We would go there frequently as kids, like every summer we would go there. And, as much as I think the mythology of Japanese architecture is the beauty and exquisiteness of the architecture, it was the rhythm and density and activity of Tokyo as a city that made it something that was absolutely alive for me. And the fact that there would be a place that was so different than growing up in California, that it would be that dense and feel so modern. And yet, if you turned the corner, that you would be in a neighborhood that would be 150 years old and be of an entirely different scale than Shibuya or a downtown area of the city. And that kind of scale shift, density shift, were all things that I was mesmerized by. And I feel like that experience was something from the very beginning that made me interested in cities. I feel fortunate to say that I've had many. I would say Stanley Sadowitz was really an important figure in my undergraduate education, because he was the first person who was committed to teaching, but also had an active practice. And what was captivating about the way he talked about architecture is that architecture always has a generative idea. And that idea in some way motivates and instills the ideas that become the form of a building. And so from there, going to Harvard for graduate school it created a really strong foundation for going to graduate school that I feel very fortunate to have, and that a lot of people I sensed from at Harvard didn't have that kind of solid set of fundamental beliefs about architecture. And I feel like that was really a big strength for me. And then when I was there, the two figures that were really important were Rafael Moneo and Alvaro Siza. And I was fortunate enough to work for Moneo during school and then for a time afterward. And I think what I learned there was that this idea that you could think about the ideas of not only the building, but of the urban context and the historical context in which buildings are situated, and then to begin to think about the materiality and details of the building. So those were really, that was a really powerful educational / professional experience. And then being able to take a studio with Alvaro Siza was something where it created a sensitivity to form that I don't think could be explained through his words or his books or his sketches. I think it's something that the transmission of that comes from dialogue with him and interaction and a kind of response, reaction to drawings. And you know, meaning to draw something, to have him look at it and then respond to it through a sketch of his. It was this really amazing way to begin to understand architecture that goes beyond words. So in a way, I guess, you know, that on one hand, the experience of working with Raphael and to talk about architecture, to think about architecture historically, to think about the scale and reality of the building in a site, are all things that you talk about, that you talk through, that you iterate on, but with a clear sense of the dialogue of what's happening. And then on the other hand, I felt that with CISA, the thing that was so powerful was this idea that, in a sense, buildings talk for themselves, that they are their own entities, and learning from them and learning from the options of form, the options of scale, the options of light quality, resonated with me from the very beginning and has been an influence in the work that we do. So those were so powerful, and I feel like, you know, like if it just stopped there, that would be great. You know, it's enough fuel for the mind, you know, to begin a career. And so I worked for a while, and I felt something was missing, you know, and I couldn't really explain what it was. And so I went back to school into a PhD program at Harvard also, and it was there that I met Rem Koolhaas, and we worked together on the Harvard project on the city. And I felt that experience of doing research by coming up with the actual method of doing the research. I mean, I think that's what was so exciting, was that the idea of what is architectural research and what's its contribution, how is it different from any other field of research, was something where there was no textbook for that, and it was really working with him and developing with the students a methodology for doing research that was such an important part of my career. And that was something where, for me, it clicked that the thinking about architecture articulated through visual and three-dimensional means was something that integrated all of the previous influences and inspirations that I had up till then. So, you know, I think PhD was not really for me, you know, that it's for really serious people. And I think that this idea that you could do research that dealt with the now and with current conditions and can contribute back to a cultural discussion about the current moment was something that I felt really was exhilarating. And so from there, we did Harvard Project on the City, a study of Rome, a study of Lagos, Nigeria, a study of communism. And it was through those formalizations of research that that OMA formulated AMO, and I worked at AMO, and we worked on projects for Harvard, Prada, Condé Nast, Wired Magazine, and others. I think that the generation in which I was trained, there was a lot of thinking about architecture in the US before doing the architecture. And I'm not sure if that really sat with me really well. You know, that I think what really resonated with Moneo and with CISA is that it was a preference to take action, and it was through taking the action of building and designing that an iterative process happened with the architects of doing a building, learning from it, doing another building, learning from it, and evolving the work that they did. And I think that with CISA had more of a driving creative process than, say, to do a building, to think about debates in architecture, to do another building and debates on architecture. I mean, I really feel like it was more of a thing where they were integrated into the design in a seamless way that prioritized the experimentation in the form. That the model for practice was go to school, learn as much as you can, work for somebody whose work that you connect with, and maybe after 10 or 15 years, start your own practice, and by the time you're 50, that you hit your stride. And I mean, I think that is a good roadmap. I don't think it's the only roadmap. I think there are pitfalls to that. There are pitfalls to, in America, starting early and just start building. I think that there are definitely pitfalls. Like my advice to my 22-year-old self, I think would be, think about the dialogue that you want your architecture to be in. Because I think the thing about, if in America you start young and you just start building, if you're not clear about the dialogue of who you want the work to connect with and resonate with, that there's a huge risk of just going adrift and being caught up with the day-to-day necessities of practice more than thinking about how to extend that discussion. And I see that a lot. I mean, I see that a lot with practice in Los Angeles, that there's so many architects that build a lot, that do really good work, but who that work connects with in South America, in Europe, and Asia, I think is a thing that feels really random, that the architects don't, I don't know, maybe don't have the agency to create references that would resonate with other people. And I really feel that that's important as an architect, that if and like, I mean, I believe this in a maybe old-fashioned way, that as architects, our tools are the buildings that we design and the words that we use to describe architecture and what architecture practice is. And that with those two tools, how you connect with people you respect, with architects around the world, with people who are interested in architecture who aren't architects, that being able to have that discussion is really, really important to have as part of one's toolbox. After working at AMO, I started my own practice, and also started teaching at Columbia with C-Lab, which was a research and publishing platform. So we did research and started Volume magazine. And so we published, I was a feature editor of Volume magazine. And so we published, I think, 40 something issues during that time. And we did projects like the Whitney Biennial and for the New Museum, we did small projects. It was a really, really great balance between the two. But then I would say, we did one project for Red Bull that was really great. And I think that what was really funny about that was that the people who commissioned it, I think, commissioned us because of Volume magazine. That they were interested in content and ideas about architecture as much as or that they believed that the content and ideas of architecture were hand in hand with the design of architecture. And so I think that was the project that really clicked for us as an office, that, oh wow, that there are people in the world that want and care about the resolution of the form, but they're also really, really interested in an early on discussion about the program, about what this project will do, what its social impact will be, what its cultural impact will be. And I think that was where as you say, this kind of research background and building background really clicked. The thing that made AMO and Volume really successful in my mind was that architects thinking about the world could have great insights about the world, not just about architecture. So whether it's about aging, whether it's about counterculture, environmental sustainability, the library, ambition, that all of these things were things that we believed that we could have insights on that would go beyond talking to other architects. And that was something that became a really powerful tool in working with clients to do building projects. A project that might be a multi-unit residential project could be something that could talk about a specific residential need for housing that doesn't exist within a given place, that either is related to generational issues or income issues or a desire for landscape in a high density building. That those are things that are not just architectural issues. They're issues that matter to people's lives. The evolution from having ideas, integrating that into the architecture, and now doing buildings, I would say the thing that has been most important in our recent work is that the work as a physical entity has some kind of emotional impact on people when they're in it. So not that they have an emotional impact like, oh, I get what the building is about, or, oh, this must have some reference to, I don't know, some kind of architectural historical reference. No, I think it's about being able to walk into a building and have some kind of emotional response to it that triggers a way of seeing the world that's different than before they walked in. And I feel like that it is important to understand as an evolution of the thinking, not a regression or a circling back to a simpler idea. I really think it's something where that the architecture can build upon itself in a way where you do research, you do analysis, you come up with creative ideas about how to approach a building, you design a building, and that the end result is not that you see a building and say, oh, I understand what the strategy is. No, that a building has the power to go beyond that, and that is the resonance that it has as you walk through it. And I think something that maybe is less talked about in terms of research is that, one could go on doing research endlessly, and that in that way, part of, I think, building a method of research is thinking about what its application will be. And that in the kind of current version of it that I'm interested in, it's coming up with a strategy. And what I mean by strategy is not, if a person had $5 billion, what would they do with the project? I think what is really important is when you have a project at hand and there are limited resources, and you figure out what you can do most powerfully with those limited resources. So how you could creatively align the available resources to achieve a unique endpoint is something that is the application of research. It's doing research to be able to formulate that and then to put it into motion as a project. The idea of an architect finding creative time by staying up late in the middle of the night, I think that there's definitely something to that. But now at this point in my life with kids and whatnot, I really, really love waking up at 4:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and that I find that to be my creative time. And from then to whatever 6:30 is really when like most of the work of the work of coming up with new things that propel the rest of the day happens, and that's so important to have as part of one's time. The thing that really gets me excited about academia is to translate the experiences of practice in such a way that they help students to learn about architecture, and that there's knowledge that's produced in the profession that is deeply valuable to academia. So, if I think, the model, at least that I experienced going to architecture school, was that the ideas are generated in academia and those influence practice, that there's an equal flow of information from the experiences of practice that could have a benefit to academia, and trying to find ideas that could be thought of as being worthwhile within an academic discussion is really how I see having a contribution to academia. What I think is great about architecture now is that there isn't a requirement to have a basic set of references throughout architecture culture, or within a school, and that the idea of a core instruction in academia, I think, is something that is totally different than it was 15 years ago or 20 years ago, and that's good. That the range of priorities, the range of interests that feed architecture has never been richer. And that's a super important step that education has taken in the US. I think when I went to Berkeley, it was $1,100 a year, something like that. And so the idea that you could get a world-class education for not that much money in the US is something that is so important. And that's why I think that the UC system is one of these public institutions where the founders of it were thinking not of what would be the benefit of this 20 years from now, but 100 years from now or 150 years from now. And the fact that as a system, it's only gotten stronger and stronger, and it has expanded to create levels of access to information, to education as it's grown, is something that is really a testament to legislators in California. And that is an access to the middle class for many families and many the kids of many families, and the fact that this exists alongside elite education is such an important thing for society. And that's one of the reasons why I find it so important to be teaching at UCLA, a school that's part of that system. And its values in terms of education are really, as a system, really does feed into the way that it works within architecture education. And what I mean by that specifically is that meeting students where they are and developing their knowledge from there is a very different way of teaching than the way I was taught, the way I was taught at other institutions. And whereas I think that the model at places like on the East Coast are to expect the highest level of performance and mark education based upon delivering the highest level of performance to those people who meet that standard. And I think that it works really, really well to meet people where they are, because their potential for success is much greater. When you look at the new buildings in Los Angeles, especially the multi-unit projects that get built here, you're probably really shocked and like are in a state of bafflement because with so much of the work that's going on now, they have like 3 or 4 extra materials that are really needed, like a metal siding, a textured concrete, a copper siding of some sort. And I feel like that is a byproduct of the design review process, where if a design review committee sees a project that's really simple, that from their experiences, they're really worried that it'll mean that the project will be under budget, that the builder, developer might do things in a way that are very inexpensive and as a result lack quality. And so all of these materials, my theory is all these materials get layered on there as a way to create modulation and texture and visual interest in a project, so that educated, commissioners see that and say, okay, there's some design thought in there, there's some investment in design. But I feel like in the end, the result is something that's horrible for everybody, that the designs oftentimes are just a mishmash of different clashing textures, and that they don't add anything to the quality of living in those spaces. So as architects, being able to render and communicate the power and quality of spaces is something that's incumbent at this time in LA in order to achieve architecture that could be as powerful as architecture in Latin America. I feel like we don't have those references here as a collective that we can easily communicate those to design commissions, planning commissions, and that we need to do that as architects. I really feel that renderings, the way that we do renderings, will help so much in getting there as a community. It's possible for architects to do really good work at a low cost. So like we're doing a series of projects here that are for single family houses where the design is very simple. It's change the scale of the windows or change the position of windows relative to skylights, use daylight to create a sense of scale and of beauty of an interior of a house. And so, a project could, like those projects, are projects that are very inexpensive. And why we're doing it is to demonstrate for ourselves that you could do architecture in a way that doesn't have to do with using really expensive materials or really expensive technologies, and that doing architecture like that has in a very simple way has this high degree of satisfaction as an architect, because they're like musical etudes. Like you can really begin to think about simple ideas about the relationship of mass to light to ventilation, and that if you do a series of those, it makes you so much better as an architect. And I guess what is important to say there is that the ambition of doing a project like that is no less than a project where the budget might be very great. And so that's what I was trying to say before, is that that as a younger architect, whether you're working by yourself on something very simple, or if you get a great job working for somebody, it's the level of ambition that one sets for themselves that becomes really important. So it's not the budget, but it's really important to think about, again, the aspiration that people have of the discussion of the people that they want to engage in a discussion. The idea of doing these simpler projects were inspired by the architecture of Mexico, and seeing how contemporaries can do such beautiful work that deal with precisely these issues of daylight, of scale, of indoor-outdoor living, and to be able to do things that are totally beautiful, like in an emotional way, that don't have to do with budget. And yeah, so I think it's something where there's a lot of room for that in Los Angeles, a place like Los Angeles, where there's a plenitude of good weather, that it's a thing where that could automatically become the palette of architects. And I guess the thing there that is so critical is that there's so many architects that don't have to wait around to get a project that is that inexpensive and available. And that for young architects, especially in a place like Los Angeles, I think the goal is to take advantage of those opportunities in a way where you take full advantage of it, and you do something that is of greater ambition than a standard that will meet the satisfaction of the client only. The client has to be happy, that's a given. But I think our job as an architect is to make it more beautiful than somebody could have imagined before. So, a client might have a dream house, but actually showing them what that could be is something that is our job. One of the kind of working themes in our office is Latin Americanization. Like to be able to take full advantage of the given basic opportunities of a project, and that if you overcomplicate them, that opportunity gets lost. The hardest thing to learn is that what a client finds interesting and what, I don't know, an audience in an academic environment find interesting is the same thing. Or at least they could be, that through the work that you do, they could be the same thing. And it's not even an issue of modulation, that you would communicate one differently in one audience and communicate that same thing differently to a different. I don't think it's that. I think it really is the same thing. And I feel like that was a big evolution in the way that we think, and that was something that was not so obvious. And that the biggest challenge for the future is now that we have a growing body of work in Los Angeles that is ground up and residential, and now that we have work that is media, culture, and work related in New York, that what we really want to get to is a level where we can now do work throughout the world, that we could take these skills that we've learned in two places that have very unique challenges of building and be able to apply that in Asia, in the Americas, in Europe, and to grow that way. And I'm sure there'll be lots of discoveries along the way of trying to do that, and that being an architect and being able to go through these sets of experiences is what I live for.